It's now 6 months since I discovered that my spiritual teacher was physically, emotionally, and sexually abusing students. What's happened in that time? Wow. You know, when I heard about this, I assumed that everyone else in the sangha would also be appalled, and I thought that those who had been abused this way would suddenly, now that someone had actually sort of pointed out that, yeah, guys, you've actually been abused here, that they would go, oh dear, oops, shit, and look at it again and go, well, have we? Is this real? Is this really how it's supposed to be? But that's not what happened. What happened was a whole bunch of people dug their heels in and basically said, there's nothing wrong here. Nothing wrong at all. This is all fine. This is how it's meant to be. And if you think that it's not okay to behave for a teacher to behave this way, that means that you haven't understood the Vajrayana teachings. You know, I know the Vajrayana teachings reasonably well. And I know about this thing called crazy wisdom. But I also know that there's a big, big difference between the occasional unconventional behaviour that might wake up a student and just continual daily beatings. I suppose because it was a spiritual organisation, we were supposed to be following the teachings of the Buddha. I kind of expected that those in charge would follow those teachings. But the lies, the lies have been amazing. I mean, I know that people can convince themselves of anything. And I know people can make assumptions and believe that those assumptions are actually truth. One example was this idea that the 8 letter writers want to bring down Rigpa and Tibetan Buddhism and the Dharma. And, you know, that's just nonsense. And anyone who reads the letter, you know, properly and carefully can see that that's not their aim. It was never planned to go to the press. I mean, they weren't naive. They figured it would probably get out there eventually. But the idea was that Rigpa would deal with this internally, that it would never need to go to the press. You know, so somebody leaked it to the press, but it wasn't the 8 students. But this is not what's been told, you know. Lies have been created and propagated. It's been called a press campaign. It's not a press campaign. There is no campaign. None of the 8 set up those articles. They didn't approach the newspapers. The newspapers approached them. There were other people who went to newspapers and tried to get articles written in newspapers, for sure, but not the 8. And again, it was just, you know, it's just individuals doing what they think is right, you know, really for the sake of the Dharma, because they can look at this behaviour and see that it's not dharmic. It's not what the Buddha taught, you know. But it's not a press campaign. You know, a press campaign is something that's organised, you know. It's something that's organised, it's got some sort of intention behind it. And, you know, that's just not the case. So all of this stuff has kind of happened, and it's so incredibly un-Buddhist that it's just astounding. It's astounding. It astounds me at every turn. I've supported those who've spoken out about the abuse from the very beginning, because to me abuse is simply wrong and it has no place anywhere, most especially in a spiritual institution. For that I have been maligned and I have been removed from Facebook groups, even when, you know, I wasn't going to say anything negative, and I've been prevented from attending the Australian retreat. Great. You know, this is unbelievable. Like many other people, I gave many years of service to Rigpa. Was it all just meaningless. I mean, yes, I did learn a lot, you know, and I'll be forever grateful to Rinpoche for introducing me to the Dharma. So, you know, I have no problems there. But just the whole way this has kind of been handled is it just blows me away. It continues to absolutely amaze me. But what I realize is that no matter what people are doing, how they're behaving, it's basically comes from the fact that they're all hurting, you know, and this is what unites us, you know, and there are some people who have been very angry about this behaviour of Sogyal Rinpoche for a very, very long time. And, you know, there are some people who go, oh, you know, they're just angry, as if that somehow negates what they have to say. But in actual fact, their anger comes from pain, just as denial comes from pain. I think my personal pain is basically past, but there's a sadness there, you know, it's just a sadness that, you know, remains because, you know, it's just so incredibly sad to see a tradition basically covering up this kind of thing out of fear of the negative consequences of people discovering that this kind of abuse happens in Tibetan Buddhist sanghas, and that it's even seen as okay. I mean, that's really what is most horrifying about this, is that there are lamas who see this as okay. And in the last 6 months, there's been very, very few who have come out and said, no, it's not okay to behave like this. Most of them have been silent, and some of them have actually stood up and said, yeah, it's fine. It's fine that he behaves this way, to anyone that he's given empowerments to, you know. But it's not okay. I mean, it's just like not okay. There's some really weird blinkers there for anyone who thinks that the kind of behaviour that's been outlined in this letter is ever okay, you know. Being a Tibetan Lama does not mean that you don't have to abide by, you know, basic principles of non-harming and compassion that are part of the Buddhist teachings, you know, the foundation of the Buddhist teachings. And of course, you know, the people who support Sogyal Rinpoche, who still think he's done nothing wrong, will say that it is compassion. They will say that in a next life, these people that have been harmed this life will in the next life, you know, benefit from this. They will say that karma is purified by the fact that he beats them, you know, by the fact that he holds them out in front of hundreds of people and belittles them. So, you know, that's a belief. But when you look at these people, when you talk to these people as I have, and you see the depth of their pain and the amount of money that they've had to spend in therapy to come to a point where they can, you know, like function in a healthy way again, there's no way that you can continue to subscribe to that kind of idea, because it's completely ignoring what's in front of your face. And people will say, oh, yes, but he's done so much good. Yes, but he's done an incredible amount of harm to some people as well. And that doesn't negate the good, of course, but neither does the good mean that this kind of behaviour should be allowed to continue. And we hear now that he's coming back to teach again. Just as soon as he's got fixed his, you know, got some strength back after fighting his cancer, he's going to be teaching again. And what is to stop him from continuing on the same way? I mean, there's supposed to be a code of conduct coming. So, great. But what point is a code of conduct if the people instituting the code of conduct don't think there's anything wrong with what the Lama has done? You know, it's like, you know, covering up and protecting and not coming out and saying it's wrong and all this kind of stuff. You know, it's all done as a defence for the religion. It's done out of fear, and it's, you know, it's understandable, but, you know, it didn't work real well for the Catholic Church, and it isn't going to work long term any better for Tibetan Buddhism. You know, the point is this kind of behaviour has got to stop. And it's got to stop now. And the only way that it will stop will be if Tibetan Buddhism, the lamas in Tibetan Buddhism, stand up and say, no, man, you can't behave like that anymore. And if they don't do that, what they call the press campaign, if they don't do that, those people like me who are absolutely appalled at this kind of behaviour are going to keep on pointing out to people that it's going on. They're going to keep on pointing out that there are people running these sanghas and teaching these teachings who think this is all absolutely fine. Because, you know, how can you entrust your spiritual growth to somebody like that? And I don't just mean the teacher, I mean the students who will be running your courses. You know, these are people who think it's fine. If they didn't think it was fine, they would have left. I mean, that's where Rigpa is now. You know, they've made it quite clear that they don't want anybody there who isn't completely and utterly dedicated to Sogyal Rinpoche. And that basically means that you think that he didn't do anything wrong. So that means that if you go to Rigpa now, you know, to do your little course, the person who's running that course does not see anything wrong with a teacher hitting people. There is the nun punching that he did in front of 1,000 people in the temple in Lera Bling. Now that's pretty clear. It's pretty obvious. It doesn't matter that the nun said she didn't see it as abuse. It doesn't matter that she, you know, ignores the fact that she was in tears and on obvious distress at the time. That doesn't matter because all of those people saw him hit a nun. And we all know that it's wrong to punch people in the gut. How is it this guy gets away with it? You know, he's been given the opportunity to, you know, apologize, to make amends, to do the spiritual thing and come clean about this. And he's not done it, and neither has the organization. So where are we now? I don't know. Rigpa's bringing in the lawyers. They've engaged lawyers to supposedly interview the 8. I don't know at this stage whether the 8 are going to participate in this or not. 125 people in Lera Bling have engaged a lawyer to sue another lawyer who was collecting testimonies from people who felt that they'd been abused. The mind boggles. It's just such an incredible mess. And me, I just look at all this and I'm just very, very sad. I'm sad for all those people who are in denial. I'm sad for all those people who were hurt. And I'm very, very sad that the lamas of Tibetan Buddhism don't have the guts to stand up for what is right. That they've obscured, like, basic human decency. I really think the Buddha would be appalled. The wonderful thing is that there are some lamas, like Mingyur Rinpoche, who have stood up and made it quite clear that there's no place, really is no place for abuse in Tibetan Buddhism. Rigpa says that. They say that in their press release about this. They say there's no place for abuse. But they don't see this behaviour as abuse. So they think there is no abuse. It's bizarre. It's bizarre and it's very, very sad. And yet it's understandable because we're not enlightened, any of us. And probably the biggest delusion we can have about this is looking at someone who behaves this way and thinking that he is enlightened. That's the big lie. Anyway, so that's where we are now, and who knows where this is going to go. It looks to me at this moment that Rigpa, anyway, is going to kind of go like Scientology. You know, there are people who basically know that it's a cult, and I mean, I don't like to use that word, but there's an awful lot of cult tactics being used in Rigpa. And there are other people who will just, you know, carry on inside thinking it's all wonderful, and there'll be other people who will join and, you know, go and give their money and support the whole machine to continue. And that's just how it's going to be, you know, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. we've tried our best to get them to see that coming clean about this would be the best idea. But, you know, you can't make people see something that you think is wise if they don't think it's wise. And, you know, the human's desire to protect what's theirs, you know, to protect their livelihood and their belief systems is enormous. So what can you do? You know, I mean, apart from a bunch of people getting together to do some kind of class action, which, you know, really can't see happening because, you know, most of the people that have been harmed are just trying to get on with their lives, you know. And the more that this is discussed, the more it just re-traumatizes them. So, you know, there's not, in my experience, a lot of desire for people to come forward and do that. And, you know, Rigpa's playing on this. And at the same time, they are, you know, threatening people who are speaking up with legal action, which is kind of playing on that. You know, it's all very horrible. So what now? I don't know. I mean, I think all you can do is make people aware of what they're buying into if they go into Rigpa. Yeah, I think it's important to help people make a distinction between genuine Tibetan Buddhism with lamas who do actually follow, you know, ethical behaviour, and lamas who distort the teachings for their own benefit. I think it's vital that people are made to, you know, help to understand that, you know, what Rigpa is and how Sogyal Rinpoche has behaved is not intrinsic to Tibetan Buddhism. There's a lot of problems in Tibetan Buddhism that if they want the religion to continue as, you know, sort of viable into the coming years, the lamas really need to deal with. But it's quite clear to me now that there's very few who have the courage, if you like, to actually move away from, you know, the feudal structures that cause all this, that basically keep the lamas in power on the top of their thrones. And, you know, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Unfortunately, you know, that's true. I mean, these guys are products of their culture, just as we are products of our culture. And human rights and people not being abused is very, very important for our culture. So we need to be really, really careful that we don't import something into the West that doesn't share those values. And the crazy thing about this is that, you know, abuse is not part of Buddhism at all. And yet it is kind of insidious in the Tibetan tradition. The beliefs are passed on faithfully as if they're pure. But I really wonder at the purity when Sogyal Rinpoche's own teacher actually, like, systematically beat monks when he turned up at a monastery. 500 lashes, all of them, 10 at a time, you know? So that's how it is. Can we do anything about it? Probably not, which is very unfortunate. But there are some people who like my writing and think that my words have a certain power to help people become aware of these issues, and those people are being my patrons to keep me writing for the What Now blog. So I guess for so long as I've got people who are willing to, you know, pay for the time it takes me to write stuff, I'll keep writing stuff and just hope that there can be some kind of breakthrough. Because it's a real shame to see people turning away from what is a very powerful spiritual tradition that has an immense amount of benefit to bring to people. To see it being tarnished, not by people speaking up about this, but by the people who are behaving badly in the first place. You know, they are pointing fingers at the people who are speaking up as if it's their fault that Tibetan Buddhism is getting a bad name. But no, they've got it wrong. The reason Tibetan Buddhism is getting a bad name is because the lamas are behaving badly and other lamas are happily covering it up and supporting them. You know? Yeah, there needs to be a lot of letting go, a lot of waking up. And yeah, I don't know if it's ever going to happen. It took the Catholic Church a very, very long time to realise that their covering up was not doing them any good. I expect it will take Tibetan Buddhism a very, very long time to do that as well. And they're going to lose a lot of students in the meantime. And that'll be no one's fault but their own. So I'm really sad about all of this. Really, really sad. Because I gained an enormous amount of benefit from my Vajrayana practice. So it's all very sad, really. I'm sorry, this is so depressing. This is just how it happens to be at the moment. That's the 6-month update on the Rigpa debacle. And so we go on. Anyway, my heart goes out to everybody who's been affected by this situation, because I know they're all hurting to some degree or other. May you be happy, may you be well. Love you all.